So much for coming out. You all are in for such a treat. I'm really excited, honored, and delighted to be here. My name is Meta Duwa-Jones. I'm an associate professor here at Howard University in the Department of English, where I specialize in poetry and poetics and performance, particularly African and African diasporic poetry and performance. I want to say a little bit before we introduce our honored guests who were chosen specifically to inaugurate this series. I'm going to say a little bit about the poetry series and then read their bios separately before each comes forward, and then we'll begin. The name of the series that we're gathered here in the Division of Fine Arts Gallery is titled the Sterling Brown, Lucille Clifton, and Amiri Baraka Poetry Series. It is a first, and really significant first in that both Sterling Brown, Lucille Clifton, and Amiri Baraka all are sons and daughters of Howard University, having taught or attended Howard, and is often known for those who know Baraka. Baraka was a student of Sterling Brown. Clifton was here for 2 years, as was Sterling Brown here for many years. Brown, Clifton, and Baraka have reshaped the literary and political landscapes of the U.S. And these Howard legends, as my colleague Dr. Shauna Carroll has noted, continue to move and inspire contemporary thinkers and writers. With the recent passing of Baraka, also known in an earlier time period as Leroy Jones, who passed away on January 9, 2014, faculty in the Department of English, with significantly the support of the Division of Fine Arts and the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, reflected on the recent transitions, Lucille Clifton only a couple of years earlier, of these significant Black poets, and decided it was important to honor and promote the work of these individuals through highlighting, bringing to campus, and celebrating those artists and writers who demonstrate a commitment to Black expression and freedom, and who contribute to Black life and culture in ways that echo their legacies. So the two poets that we have today are Kenneth Carroll and Laini Mataka. It is Sterling Brown who told us that although they dragged us in strong men from the homeland, although they changed us in strong men in coffles, although they huddled us in strong men in spoon-like fashion in filthy hatches, although they sold us in strong men to give a few gentlemen ease, the strong men keep a-coming on, the strong men stronger. And Kenny Carroll is not only a strong man, he's a strong writer, and we'll get to hear some of the strength of his words very shortly. Brown also told us in his classic and often anthologist poems, Oh Ma Rainey, he didn't leave the women out. He said, oh Ma Rainey, sing your song, now you's back where you belong. Get way inside us, keep us strong, oh Ma Rainey. So Laini Mataka will also keep us strong with her reading. And as he says in Ma Rainey, I talked to a fellow and a fellow says she just catch hold of us some kind of way. And if you've had the privilege of hearing any of Mataka's performances live or else seen them in their many variations on YouTube, this indeed captures the spirit and the power of her work. It is Clifton who also told us in her often anthologized poem, which is also on our beautiful series flyer, won't you celebrate with me? Won't you celebrate with me, Clifton said, what I have shaped into a kind of life I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. And those of you who know this line, I'm going to ask you to join me in repeating that last line that's often recited of Clifton, in which she says, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed, right? We have two successful writers here today to honor, right, that productive sense of failure in Black poetic and political resistance in that tradition, and who better to transition to now than Amiri Baraka, poet of Black poetic and political resistance, who also called us out, not through celebration, but through a sense of urgency and SOS, calling Black people, calling all Black people, man, woman, child, wherever you are, calling you urgent. Come in, Black people, come in wherever you are, urgent. Come on in. And I thank you all for coming in today for today's reading. Our first reader will be Laini Mataka. Mataka is the author. Yes.
We switched.
Oh, you all did change. Okay. Well, I was switching up. You can switch and improvise as well. So, our first reader will be Kenny Carroll. Yay. Okay. Kenny Carroll is a poet, fiction writer, essayist, and playwright whose writing has appeared in many publications, including Icarus, In Search of Color Everywhere, Bum Rush the Page, co-edited by our own Howard University, who regrets, due to a previous engagement, not being able to be here today, but our poet scholar in residence, and that's Professor Tony Medina, and Potomac Review, the Washington Post, and quite a number of others, including the Penguin Academic Anthology of African American Poetry. His book of poetry titled So What? For the White Dude Who Said This Ain't Poetry was nominated for the Patterson, really big deal, literary award, and he's had 3 of his plays produced and was a writer for BET's Story Porch program. He's former executive director of the award-winning community art service program, DCU's Writers Corps, which is really instrumental in the growth of quite a number of young, not only African American, but students of both high school age and also young college and older students in terms of them developing their sensibilities and voices as a writer. And that's actually where I first had the privilege of meeting Kenny Carroll. He is married and the proud father of a daughter and 2 sons. I didn't want to leave that out your bio.
That's right.
Welcome, Kenny.
Thank you so much, and I thank Tony Medina, who's in Detroit tonight. Confusing somebody else? No, he's doing a meeting here with somebody. Actually, he's celebrating Deli Randall in Detroit. And he sent something last night. He was hanging out with Everett Holding, so. Important part of education. Exactly, he's in good company. Well, it's only fitting that I follow Laini Mataka because I used to literally follow Laini Mataka. When I was a young writer, I wasn't so young, a new writer in DC, Mataka was one of the first poets I saw reading at Ujima. Used to have these family night programs, and I went down there to hear Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, and Mataka opened up and just, you know, when the top of your head comes off, and you're like, this is different. So it's an honor to be on any program with her. And the last time we had, speaking of Writers Corps, Baraka here doing a fundraiser for Writers Corps, Laini Mataka read on that program too. And so it's fitting that she's here. I'm glad to be here, one, obviously because, anything that honors these 3 people is something worthy to be a part of, but also that I have some, at least, tangential connection with all of them. Amir Baraka I was very close to him, and he was a mentor. Lucille Clifton, I spent 3 or 4 years straight going down to St. Mary's when she was there with my kids when they were babies, like Noah's baby. And we would go down and Lucille would hold my baby while I read, and we get it. So we had a lot of exchange in those years when she was in Maryland. And then Amir Baraka, I can't even figure out when I met him, but it was somewhere up here, I believe, in the early 80s, 79, 80. And we've been close. And Sterling Brown, my only real connection to Sterling Brown is I used to have a paper route on Kearney Street, where I served that whole area. And I used to come up, and if you know DC, when you come up that hill, Kearney Street, the houses get further up on the hill. So I was not about to walk up the hill to all those houses, so they used to fold the paper and throw it up to his door. But like one of the skills in throwing papers up is you wanted to hit the bottom of the screen door where the aluminum was, so like to notify the people that you're there. And then I saw a documentary, I don't know, maybe coincidental, that Haile Karima did after Winter with Sterling Brown. In the documentary, he complains about the damn paper boy. So I don't know if that was me. I'm almost like to think it was, that I know him, so I could have some connection, but who knows. But I want to start out with the first poem my 31-year-old son ever learned was a poem by Lucille Clifton. When I told her this, she said, no, it's not a poem. I refer to that as verse. But this verse by Lucille Clifton called Listen Children. I dedicate it to my friends who've had their children here tonight. Listen children, keep this in the place you have for keeping, always. Keep it always. We have never hated black. Listen, we have been ashamed, hopeless, tired, mad, but always, always, we loved us. We have always loved each other, children, always. Pass it on. Lucille. Then I'm going to do a second piece by Lucille that I just remember being in a reading that she gave in Maryland at the State House when she was a poet laureate for a minute out there. And she read this piece and everybody got mad. Well, not me, but the white people got mad. It's called Slave Ship. Loaded like spoons into the belly of Jesus, where we lay for weeks, for months, in the sweat and stink of our own breathing. Jesus, why do you not protect us? Chained to the heart of the angel, where the prayers we never tell are hot and red as our bloody ankles. Jesus, angel, can these be men who vomit us out from ships called Jesus, angel, grace of God, unto a heathen country? Jesus, angel, ever again, can this tongue speak? Can this bone walk? Grace of God, can this sin live? And then I'll follow that up with a piece of my own, and it's a piece called Personal Jesus. The first epigram is from a quote by a Buddhist monk, and it says, if God permits such misery to exist, he cannot be good. If he is powerless to prevent it, he cannot be God. When I was young, I had my own personal Jesus, my real imagined friend, my walking partner through rival hoods, my companion through the abyss of a chronically weary childhood, wars and addicts of thugs and nightmares, of dreams and a nuclear holocaust made by industrial complexes. Jesus would wake me for 8 a.m. Mass at St. Francis de Sales, would bless me with a sun rising in glory above the homes on Montana Avenue, would answer all my questions as we walked alone together with the world up 17th Street, would animate the singing sparrows and foraging squirrels, would make sure my father came home safe after a weekend binge, would restore my mother after despair, would keep grandma from dying until I could understand, would make black girls as beautiful as Coltrane and as Delphonics cascading from cheap speakers. Personal Jesus kept me safe from returning war veterans, gone mad, I thought, because they had misplaced their own personal Jesus in some jungle, lost him to some chaotic firefight, or had given him up for a new skag god that ripped at their veins and tortured their souls. I had my personal Jesus, my ace, an eternal partner, a spiritual valet, a Jesus just for me. A Jesus for me until that year, when an emaciated Madonna and child entered our living room. Through the edited exhalations of the 6 o'clock news, the messengers could not find words for such horror as they Huntley and Brinkley short of the single image of a starving child clinging to an exhausted nipple like a faith stronger than belief, stronger than hope. Eyes wide, ignoring the flies who had begun the feeding ahead of the vultures. It was then I gave up my personal Jesus, sent him post-haste to the Sahel or to India to find some jail filled with dead hopes and suffering greater than mine. Could not live knowing I had hoarded the King of Kings, a miracle worker, while other children died dusty and hungry, died in agony and hopelessness. I dispatched my personal Jesus, wasted no time with goodbyes. And now, each night, while the world prays, I am unselfishly silent, not wanting to distract my former personal Jesus as he shields a Palestinian grandmother, sits next to a Ugandan schoolgirl, comforts a Chinese worker, makes salat with an Iraqi farmer. I, who am too abundantly blessed in a country too rich to be righteous, tell my children good night, lay beside the warmth of my wife, and write heathen scripture for an unholy canon. This is a piece for Mary Baraka. You know, I read a couple of years ago, the last time he and I had the chance to talk. Darryl Stover, a friend of me and Marge's, had invited us down to Durham for a program, and Baraka and I got to hang out in the hotel, and I was telling them, you know, like, I'm trying to write a poem for you, Amiri, and it's hard. And he was like, so? I'm just telling you. But we had a chance to spend some good time together. So this is for Amiri, and of course the quote is from, I forget which book it's in, but I think it's Collected Works is where I got it from. Slave boy Leroy from Newark Hill, if capitalism don't kill me, racism will. The first thing I remember is the last thing. Embraces, laughter, words, your exhaustion and continued brilliance. What I think to say now is lost in the smallness of this language, in the inexactness of rhetoric. Only music or dance or some broad aggregate of colored tears might suffice in your praise. Sadness is selfishness, I know. What the world has lost ignores what the world had first found. Enslaved boy Leroy, who birthed this Baraka, this mouth, this brain, this instrument of intellect. This Amiri, who screamed at the world, who lullabied babies, who insisted on the primacy of beauty against ugly. You said poems are bullshit unless, in the country of your birth, indicted you for that. But your elegant scat, your B-do-dee-dee-dee-dee was your superhero Shazam, was your call to fight, to resist oppression in its millions of mass, to resist as an act of love. Your exoskeleton of fire and rage, protecting a heart that wanted black people and workers to live freely, cleanly, you said, without the dirt cast on them by heathens with dollar-sign morality. In this moment of mourning, this instant of pain, I am remembering your warrior's heart and artist's skill. I am remembering laughter and eyes big enough to capture the world. So I worked with a whole bunch of young people for years, reviewed music for the Washington Post, and obviously just a typical lover of hip hop. And so, every now and then hip hop artists say stupid shit. So we recall when Lil Wayne made the rhyme with the reference to Emmett Till in the piece, and I believe he later apologized. But I just imagine this piece, and it's called Emmett Till Speaks to Lil Wayne. Even at 14, black, handsome, my stuttering made more sense than most of your rhymes. Even in the sharpened canines of Jim Crow, I was braver than your chants of death to other black men. Even in 1955, when my mother was suffering the 1,000 humiliations of racism, I was more loving to black women than you. Even in the dark recess of a town called Money, I knew better than to make money my God or my guide. Even with the slobbering mob preparing to sacrifice me, I fought back, The crackers angry at my refusal to surrender to the lies of Mississippi. I was more thug than your inarticulation. Even when I was disappeared, my body a question mark, a riddle to be answered by a nation grappling with historic evil. I was more here than you are now. Even when dragged from the Tallahatchie River, my body weighed down by the absence of justice, my mother's tears rebaptizing me for eternity. I had more dignity in an ugly death than you in a privileged life. Even in a Chicago funeral home, my face a Dolly painting, a disfigured crucifix, a tortured icon, a beacon for struggle. Even with my face unrecognizable to my family and the God that made me, I was more beautiful than your self-mutilation. Even now, when you use my name to debase as a metaphor and wordplay, I am still frozen in time. More man at 14 than you shall be with 1,000 platinum albums camouflaging the sickness you celebrate. I read that at a college in all the young hip hoppers came up to me. Well, I don't think you understand what the you got to listen. I'm like, yeah, I said I think I got it. I could be wrong. Use the word play. Anyway, so there is a trying to find a piece. Me and a good friend of mine, young man used to be also in writers for Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's one of the best young writers and thinkers around right now. And of course, Laini knows his family well, knew him from when he was a baby. But he was always such a talented young man. And I love talking to him and debating with him because he's so sharp. And he and I had this debate kind of via social media during the 150th celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation, because Ta-Nehisi and a couple of Atlantic, I believe one was a New York Times, one was an Atlantic monthly pieces. He sort of celebrated Abraham Lincoln, and I told him I had a sort of different view of Lincoln, based on my historical understanding of him. Anyway, so this piece kind of came out of our discussion. It's called Emancipation Proclamation at 150. This is not for Abe Lincoln, the reluctant emancipator, benefactor of the American myth-making. This is not for Abe Lincoln or his expedient document and his fidelity to a union with slavery. This is not for Lincoln, his stupid-ass stovepipe hat that nodded and winked and pledged comity with slave states. This is not for Lincoln, who sent back those who sought freedom into the snarling jaws of servitude and torture. This is not for him, or his duplicitous pronunciations turned into songs by adoring revisionists. This is not for Lincoln, transformed by an assassin's bullet into a broke-down savior whose history is best served by sycophants and school children. This is not for Lincoln or his Lankian elegance or homespun wit full of references to darkies and niggers. This is for a nation of people haunted by an 1850 law that turned every face into terror, every hand into an instrument of the bondsman. This is for Margaret Garner, who poised on a cliff of madness, chose to jump into that abyss rather than return to captivity. This is for Frederick Douglass, who revolted against the driver's lash, taking his freedom and his dignity. This is for Harriet Tubman, whose celestial prophecy took her underground to reach the star of freedom. This is for the thousand of nameless faces who did not wait for the faltering aid to secure their liberty, who led themselves through cannon fire and dismal swamp to the future. This is for those who died in that trek, whose blood fertilized a new nation, who were willing to strike the first blow for real emancipation. This is for the abolitionists, those who fought the strange institution with guns and legislation. This is for those who look like me, who knowing only the promise of blood made possible this 150th year, those who knew paper was not enough to make freedom real. I was, and am still very disturbed by the disappearance of the 8-year-old Alicia Rudd.
Yes.
I have students who live in the Kenilworth Parkside area, and when I have to take them home, for the last week we've been seeing the folks out there, searching for her in Kenilworth Park, and we were there actually today when they found Khalil Malik Tatum's body, and saw all the activity around that. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm going to write a piece for Alicia Rudd. And then in going through some of my pieces, I realized I actually have some pieces that are more Alicia Rudd's that I wrote back in the 80s. And just a quick introduction to these two pieces. They came about, DJ Renegade worked at Blue High School in a grant that we got when I was president of African American Writers here, running a workshop called From Hip Hop to Literature or something like that. And he called me one time, he's like, Kenny, man, I'm having a hard time up here because, the kids aren't focused because of the 2 girls who disappeared. And I'm like, what do you mean? I've been watching the news, what 2 girls? He's like, there are 2 girls and nobody knows what happened to them. They were, in school and everybody knew them and nobody's been able to find them. And then it came out in the news about how sort of the police had bungled the search for these girls. And at the same time, Marion Barry was returning from his prison sentence back he had been back and had been to a rehab. And I thought about this, I thought about Alicia not being found in the mayoral race and how these things came together. And so these are 2 pieces that kind of went together in a longer piece called Poems from My City. The first one is called Missing and Murdered, 1 for Nikisha. The headlines from 2 headlines are from the Washington Post. 1, the city scrambles as the mayor announces a 2-week retreat to deal with spiritual relapse and physical exhaustion. The second one, police admit losing body of first murdered girl in bureaucracy. I tell them to turn the TV down. The news on with a special bulletin say the mayor is leaving town to deal with his problems. But I'm talking to the police again. He said he already got my report. I ignore him and tell him for the 10th day in a row that my daughter is missing. I don't talk about my dreams or mention this time that I love her. I say it plain, spell her name again for him. Assure him in even tones that Nikisha ain't never stayed away without calling me. He sighs. His hurried breath rushes past my ears. I wonder if he is rolling his eyes or even writing this down. I am careful not to lose my temper or cuss him out again. My voice shudders when I say how long she's been missing. 5 minutes later, he is finished. Says he will call if he hears anything. I want to say something like, this is an emergency, or do you have a daughter? But I taste my tears dancing on my trembling lips, and I say to him, to any God that will listen, I love my baby. The phone disconnects with a dull click, quiet as the closing of a coffin. 2, Shamika. Headline, Mayor checks out of Missouri retreat, schedules Monday press conference. Second headline, police suspect link in death of 2 DC girls, community angry over lack of response. The mayor talking about being rejuvenated. Say he ready to run the city again. But he don't say nothing about my niece, or what he gonna do about the police who didn't look for her. The undertaker returns from the back, touches me softly on my shoulder, turns down the TV and says slowly, quietly, nothing he can do for her. Say it was the same way for the other girl. Say maggots and warm air claimed their body before we did. The police say they lost her paperwork, like she wasn't nothing, like she was an overdue bill or a cheap leaflet. I feel my neck getting hot again. I try to calm down, remember why I'm here. The undertaker touches my shoulder. He says he bet she was a beautiful girl. My throat becomes a clenched fist when he say that. I see Shamika's face. Smile, sweet as honeysuckle. I want to tell him, yeah. I want to show him her 9th grade graduation picture in my pocket. But I can't say nothing. Can't hardly move. I nod my head and feel my eyes burning. He pats my shoulder. His mouth twists into a smiling frown. He shows me a nice one. Says he understands our problem and gives me a good price. Though I ain't sure about where we gonna get the money. I'm thinking about how to tell Shamika's mama. How to pile one more heartache on top of the other ones she got to carry. He hands me the papers, puts an X where he wants me to sign. He turns up the TV again. His eyes shining like new nickels when he turns to me and says, "Don't the mayor look good?" Let's see. What I want to do as we honoring DC folk, I do want to honor a great DC musician who passed, and actually his son interned with me right before his father passed. This is for Chuck Brown, and the piece is called Call and Response for Charles Lewis Chuck Brown. The antiphonal sonic response of eternity, call and response, the go-goification of the groove, the black church birthing funk, the holler back for future generation. Chuck Brown as museum calling our corpus to kinetic prayer. Patron saint of the endless jam asked us, "Hey everybody, how you feel tonight?" And we answered, "Feel like moving that body." From spirit we still hear his call, his philosophy, keep what you got till you get what you need. The inhalation of life above us, like the overlook at the panorama room, pulse carried by river, carried by song. Read a couple more pieces. Let me read this piece. I have a 17-year-old daughter who I am madly in love with. And every now and then my son was like, "Dad, who you like best?" And I say, "Well, you know, you're your sister, boy." You give me the least problems. So this is a piece, and you know, I'm a fairly irreligious dude, and so I'm not want to partake in the notion of a lot of mysticism and stuff like that. But for the entire 17 years of my daughter's life, whenever she and I have departed, and I don't mean any big thing, I mean early in the morning, dropping her off at daycare, there is inside of me some notion, some backward reflection, and you know, it just could be a possibility. I've grown up listening to Mary and Lucille Clifton, so they could have put this in my mind, but there's a notion of being an African person and what it means to be in North America and to leave your child and to be separated from them, even if it's for a short period. And I guess what always comes up in me is the notion of having been here before, a sort of remembrance. And anyway, this is called Departures for Zawadi. All I can tell you is that when we depart, something rips inside me, a small tearing, formless memory seeking articulation, this skeletal fear ancient as love. When we were separated, daughter, what antebellum horror stokes turns the simple act of waving goodbye into 1,000 heartbreaks? What geography recalls this pain? What Virginia countryside, Georgia landing, Alabama clearing, remembers our wails, our unanswered cries to new or ancestral gods? How is it now that 17 years of departures in return has not cured these recurring histories that refuse to remain properly in the past? Thank you. All right. Another good friend of mine is Delaney Cobb, and we had this conversation quite a few years ago after the Bill Cosby meltdown at Howard, I don't know what you call it. But when he did the whole, niggas is the problem thing. And me and Jelani had this discussion, thank you. Me and Jelani had this discussion, and so this was a piece called Shaniqua for Professor William Jelani Cobb. She sways against the weight of her backpack, like new trees in the bus's hacking cough, brushes back her extensions, head bowed in study, the history book, thicker than the walls of her home, is cradled in her lap, her highlighter pink like her tube top, tattooed hip proclaims Shaniqua. Between wars, revolutionary and civil, her 2-year-old skips over battlefields and emancipation, her baby a distraction, care for grandma in a neighborhood whose own reconstruction is thwarted by compromises as bitter as those she highlights. Her legs capped with new white shoes stretches across the back seat, an impromptu desk covered in jeans tight as a Republican social service budget. The silver-plated crucifix hangs from her neck. It dreams not of resurrection or eternity, but of being real bling instead of a corner hustle for a girl with 2 part-time jobs that leave her smelling of fries and knockoff perfume. The cross is tangled in her university ID. The photo is of a girl twisted into a question mark, an embarrassment undeserving of context or redemption. When she disembarks at the university, gum popping, cell phone activated by Jay-Z's 99 Problems, her Negro mothers on the bus cackle. See, that's what Bill Cosby was talking about. While she, with her burden of books, untwists herself, slowly, ungracefully, like history. And I will end with, in this electoral season, let's end with a piece celebrating my favorite and worst mayor of all time. No, this is a piece called The Hate of Washington, D.C. for Marion Barry. And this is on YouTube if you want to go on YouTube and find it. I'm doing a collaboration with the drummer, which I didn't know I was doing at the time I was filming. But they do such amazing things with media. The Hate of Washington, D.C. Marion Barry is a black voodoo king, the Diamond City poltergeist. If your right hand itches, Marion Barry will come to your cookout and dance to Chuck Brown's Bustin' Loose. If your left eye jumps, Marion Barry will be cleared of all charges. If your feet get swept with a broom, the sweeper will date Marion Barry and be pulled over by an unmarked car in an undisclosed location. If a bird flies into your house, Marion Barry will hold your grandmother's hand until she passes. If a black cat crosses your path, Marion Barry will get him a job and restore his right to vote. If the dogs in your neighborhood howl for 5 nights in a row, Marion Barry is late night creeping. You say his name like Mayor Barry, that last lottery number will come out. If you bury your infant's umbilical cord near a tree on Good Hope Road, Marion Barry will dig it up and help you find temporary shelter. If you name your firstborn Marion Barry, like Marion Barry Taquan Jones, he will read poetry to your child and give him a ride to school. If you cook black-eyed peas on New Year's Eve, Marion Barry will be the first person to cross your doorstep, followed by the FBI. If you watch the video of Marion Barry getting arrested in slow motion, you can see Joseph DeGeneva masturbating in the background and snorting the ashes of the homeroom charter. In August Wilson's unpublished play, Marion Barry is 329 years old and tells fortunes at the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X Avenue. If the Jesus in your church turns black, Marion Barry will preach the sermon. If you throw salt in the air at the Overlook at Our Lady of Perpetual Help, Marion Barry will help you get health care until you can find a job. Marion Barry has a machine that cranks out emergency hugs and doubles as a loudspeaker during election campaigns. If you say, Marion Barry gets on my damn nerves, 7 times real fast, the city paper will hire you on the spot. You will get free Washington Post papers for life, and a lonely federal prosecutor will find love. If you say Marion Barry is my man 3 times in a deep voice, 3 white people on U Street will disappear. A white girl will trip during her cotillion in Ward 3, and go-go music will cascade from a cloud over 1/3 of the city. If you get lost on Alabama Avenue, just scream Marion Barry, and Ray Ray will be your GPS. Marion Barry is a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich at the Nation of Islam rally. Marion Barry is pigfoot stew at a bar mitzvah. Marion Barry put DC on the map, then sold the map. Marion Barry didn't pay his taxes and the price of parking went up. Marion Barry gave you your first job. Marion Barry cost you your last job. Marion Barry is an anti-Negro machine. Marion Barry is holding you back. Marion Barry has embarrassed your grandfather for the last time. Marion Barry is a lightning rod for white anger, is a living legend, a living martyr. Marion Barry knows what's in mambo sauce. Marion Barry is hooked on Viagra and hubris. Marion Barry is a hate haunting DC politics. Marion Barry is the this we need to put an end to. Marion Barry is the last person at your party, and he will not go home. Thank you.
Oh yeah, how about that?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful reading. And next, I already did an introduction to the series and mentioned a bit about Lady Mataka. I'll say a little bit more, and then we'll walk her to the podium. Lady Mataka is the author of 4 books for Black Classics Press, including Restoring the Queen, Being a Strong Black Woman, The Prince of Kokomo, and as well as one of my personal favorites, her book, which I have, Never as Strangers. In the introduction to excuse me, Never as Strangers, it said that Ms. Mataka is more of a prose poet than that of a close-to-the-chest word user. Her longer pieces are, in fact, poetic prose and could even be loosely classified as poetic essays. She displays the wit and political consciousness of a June Jordan and the warmth and hugging care of Lucille Clifton. Her use of punctuation reminds one of the way a musician uses spaces, pauses, and rhythms. I asked her if there was anything else she wanted me to add to the bio, and I thought it'd be relevant for this audience to note that she said, well, perhaps they should know that Lucille and I were neighbors in Baltimore, right? I knew all the babies, right? And she said that she used to tell Lucille Clifton that you're not hard enough. But when she passed, she didn't get a chance to tell her, right, that you can't blow yourself up in every single point, every single time. And that over time, she had to learn that. So I think Lucille is still listening, right? And I think she hears you, and I think it's not at all, you don't have to be, as Kenny Carroll said, you know, overly religious or super mystical to say that it is not a coincidence that I didn't know that about your kinship and neighborship relationship with Lucille. But one thing we did know is that both you and Kenny Carroll were going to be the poets to inaugurate our Clifton, Baraka, and Brown series. And so I think those things really do come full circle. On that point, please come forward.
And I tell my therapist that I didn't bring my cane up here, especially after I've talked about her like a dog on Facebook. I had to go and apologize. She didn't even see it. I just wanted her to stop hurting me. Lucille was so sweet. Okay? She wrote me a poem once. She said, because the students came up and said, do she dance? And she said, does she dance? You had to make me go sit down. You had to call the police. Okay. Thugettes. There is a hardness, not a gayness, that colors some of our women. They see this as a man's world, so they imitate men, trading ribbons and bows for white beaters and Timbs, and yet they can wow and beguile with the best of them. They pass the first licks, drink the last drops, and talk smack like lifers with no chance of parole. Their worst case scenario is resembling their mothers, living la vida loca under some man's thumb. So when a thug enough man comes along, they bacchanal in their own softness, roughly purring till they crack the dawn. For the tragically uninformed, the black woman's beauty is not a metaphor, not a far-fetched theory to be debated by fools, not an illusion to be pierced by diligent occultists, but a fact that fuels the earth's rotation, a reality that holds the sky in perfect repose. The black woman as the center of the earth is not a fevered imagining, a hip-shaking mirage, not an inflated assertion from the low self-esteem, but a hardcore actuality ingrained as striated rock, a deep-seated fecundity, tattooed on ancient walls by speechless artists who drew pictures of big-butt women because it was all they knew of God. Tit for tat. This was on, so terrible. This was on Facebook, okay? Somebody posted Omar S. in a skirt.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then the person went, I'm not gonna tell you what they said because it's in the poem, very small piece, tit for tat. And then he said, why shouldn't men wear skirts? Women wear pants. And then I said, yeah, we wear tampons too. You gonna make me go there? The Descent of a Falling Angel. This is for an artist. His name was Robert Adams. Always had a rough time. Okay? The Akan believed you choose your parents. And you chose the experience. Because you figured that if you chose these particular people, they would help you with your karma. And you could fulfill whatever it was that you're actually here for. I had a hard time with that for a while. But whatever he chose, I couldn't believe anybody could choose this much sadness. Okay? And he had so much ability. The Descent of a Fallen Angel. Among the falling angels, you were the first to tear the blinders from my eyes. I had no idea that this AIDS thing was going to get so deep. So deep your so-called friends would run away. So deep that your so-called mother would hide and that your so-called lover would turn hetero. I heard your soul was on the run. So I went looking for you and I found you in Johns Hopkins, the hospital most blacks were afraid to go to because we all knew they would use us for experimentation whenever they got the chance. I found you skinnier than you had the right to be. I found you losing your eyesight and cursing your insight. I found you molding inside of your smart mouth. I found you blistering on the exterior and fermenting in the interior. I found you alone. Mary and Thornton were the only columns left of the temples you had erected. And I wedged myself in between, not because we were all that close, but because nobody should die alone. And you needed to know that God was not punishing you for being gay, because the real creator doesn't work that way. You needed to know that the people who won't stay don't count. And the ones that do are the only flowers worth cultivating in your garden. When I found you, I grabbed you by the hand and you begged me not to leave, like I was going to go somewhere. And when I reached to hug you, you pulled away as if I could catch what was having the hell out of you. And when I ignored your caution, I felt your soul let out a sigh that came from someplace I hope I will never have to discover in myself. You didn't know that AIDS had already eaten my father alive, and that I was not afraid to hold you, massage you, or fold you delicately inside of my heart's safekeeping. I was not afraid, because whenever I do good, I always feel like I've got coverage. How life could just leak out of a hole in your being, I will never understand. You were the bomb. Brains, looks, money, creativity, and then some. But there was always this sadness, this ineffable thing that hovered over you. You always lived on the fringes, always tried to balance yourself on the fence, never fully black or white, never totally male or female, never just plain happy or sad. I loved you because you were the first person to make me understand who I was and that I was worthy of being loved. You let me read my sorrowful poems to you and never suggested that I get a life. You let me talk about my sorrowful lovers, and you never suggested that I should try a woman. You always took me just the way I came. And that's why it was so fitting for me to be with you in the end. Not to keep the door from closing, but to keep it from slamming. I didn't bother to go to your funeral, because I knew it would be filled with deserters whining and crying as if they were auditioning for a Greek tragedy. And I had already said my goodbyes, slowly, articulately, and without drama. There are so many poems that if you go back in time, you look at and go, did I say that? What was wrong with me?
Could you tell us the title of that poem again? I don't remember.
That was The Descent of a Fallen Angel.
Descent of a Fallen. Okay.
The warrior. What the warrior is, she is. No matter how much you try to pink her, Betty Boo her, declitorize or pastel her, her ability to fight to the finish cannot be mastectomy or hysterectomy away. Her ability to define herself even in the face of death cannot be neutralized by supersonic acrobatics in and out of her vagina. What the warrior is, she shown up is. No matter how many times her womb yields, her shields and her spears are always in place. There is nothing she won't do to defend the human race, and she will always resemble your mother. Haven't seen you in a long time. Okay. This is called Till Your Ashes Give Thanks. Love is usually an unexpected phenomenon. It conceives itself wherever, whenever, however it wants. Any two pair of eyes can collide on a prepaid ride to a place their combined imaginations could not have evoked in a million Octavia Butler years. Love is completely irrational. It controls its own barometer and never feels compelled to explain itself to anybody. Love is strictly autonomous, dwelling securely within itself, marking time in its own fashion, working reality according to its own needs. Love is self-reliant. There are no circumstances upon which it depends. Love has nothing up its sleeve, but is always guaranteed to pull a rabbit about its hat. Love is a creature of infinite disguises, multiple personalities, and backed as quiet drama. Love is yourself looking right back at you when you ain't in the mood for introspection. Love is culturally deprived. Thinks nothing of protocol and doesn't give a damn about what other people think. Love never thinks straight because it has nothing to think with. It's more two-faced than a childhood friend. Will tell your mind one thing and then tell your heart another. Love is the original gangster. Will pop a sugar-coated cap all up in you, have you hip-hopping and bebopping at the same time. No matter how bad you think you are, it'll stick you up, take everything you have, and leave you talking gibberish while you wait in limbo for a heart transplant. Love is what the whole world needs and doesn't know what to do with. On a good day, it's everything you thought it would be. On a bad day, it's everybody trying to tell you. Love is a kiss that you know you shouldn't hang on to, but your stupid lips won't let go of. It's a house on fire, and instead of running out, you run farther in, looking for the living room and a comfortable place to burn until your ashes give thanks. If you think lineage doesn't matter, it does. Suppose we discovered that Donald Duck was really the son of Mickey and Minnie Mouse, we'd have a whole new slant on Disneyland then, wouldn't we? Haikus. Reap a field of bones. You one day will pay for all the lynchings you sowed. Looking for more than Spanish will pay, your soul learns to beg in English. Designer shoes on restricted feet. Nike chains better than shackles. Okay, I'm going into Restoring the Queen. Murder. Tell me, my sister, have you committed murder lately? Have you swallowed poison, lost your mind, and kept a child from its father lately? Have you put yourself first by bad-mouthing someone whose touch you know you used to die for? Have you become hard and bitter and ugly because you felt compelled to murder the memory of a man whose love you couldn't keep? Have you murdered your son lately? Have you taken his future as a man and tied it to the railroad tracks because his father failed to love you back forever? Have you robbed your daughter of a positive relationship with the first man she ever knew? Have you killed her desire to love a man by recounting war stories that still have you shell-shocked beyond belief? Have you murdered anyone lately? Have you drawn and courted anybody lately? Not because they couldn't pay child support, not because they left you for higher heights, not because they now whisper promises in a new ear, but because no one whispers anything in your ear. Have you kept a child away from his father lately? Not because the father was a junkie, a rapist, a child molester, a basher, a walking, talking horror story, but because you want to hurt him. Because you can't find any place to dispose of your pain. Have you put your child's life and future development in jeopardy because you can't get past your own pain? Must I ask you again? Have you committed murder lately? Have you kept a black man away from his child? Speaking of which, my old man. My old man was never old. He was only 15 years older than me. Yet the ways of all men jazz behind his eyes. I could sing for him, but I'm a woman now. And my song would probably sound like the whinings of all the other women who wanted to be a part of him. To his face, I used to question his wild ways, and he would question my questions, fearing and knowing that I was the embodiment of his spirit, looking him right dead in his eye. How difficult it must have been for him to see himself more in his daughter than in all of his sons. When I was young, I'd go digging into the night trying to find him, needing his presence for balance and his smile for reassurance. Other men were offered to me as surrogate daddies, but as long as he was alive, who needed them? And besides, I was a thick-rooted child, and no one's seed but my father's could claim me as fruit. The man I knew as father caused me to go wandering out into the shadows looking for men just like him, to treat me just like he treated women. White men kidnapped him and caged him so many times that his gaping absences left me with holes in my woman thing. Holes that I'm still trying to fill with poems and music and men who promised not to hurt me too much. As white people destroyed the means for black alternative livelihoods to survive, my father shrank into himself. All his hurts and all his ifs were violently jammed into his soul where no one was allowed to go. Not prying women looking for an edge or needy children looking for guidance. The man I dubbed father wanted to know what it was I was always trying to get from him. Why was I so persistent about dialogue? Why I wouldn't just go away when dismissed? Why I was always testing him for tenderness? Why I wouldn't just stop needing his love so much and go on about my estrogenic business? But I just kept resurfacing saying, but I'm your daughter, you belong to me. I'm your daughter, you belong to me. He knew that, but I reminded him anyway. And when circumstances finally slowed his roll to an imperceptible crawl, and he was forced to live at his mother's house, I loved knowing that the days of going to bars and pool halls and sad fast women to leave messages for him were finally over. That now I could find him even if I wanted nothing greater than a hug. Once I knew he was centralized, I demanded that he extend himself to me because I had spent most of my life trying to protect and defend the precious reality of our being father and daughter. And I thought we were finally in a position where I could get some of that energy back. The man I call father once lived in hell without being reduced to ashes. He walked on two legs when only crawling was allowed. And for this, a greater man can hardly exist for me. For whether positive or negative, he was always a man of power. And as flesh of his flesh, I will always be the radiance generated by that power. And I was just like him. Just like him. The eviction. Man, they touched my underwear. They handled my diary. They destroyed my altar without missing a beat. With destructive precision, they ripped my pictures from the walls, bagged my books as if they were just so much trash. They bent my records and then they stole my camera, my gun, and my watch. And before the weekend came, they got paid. For trashing a black woman's apartment, they got paid. For breaking my peace and violating my privacy, they got paid. Yeah, well, may the God of retribution pay them for real. I had a cousin who was a junkie for like a zillion years. They tried to give him that job, he wouldn't take it. He was like, I can't put people's stuff out on the street. I can find drug in my system, but I can't put people's stuff out on the street. Okay. Let me go somewhere else. All right. This is the Prince of Kokomo. Nitwit Tom on mathematics. Talking about Jefferson. Master Jefferson said blacks were naturally inferior in math. I bet Black Sally could calculate how many times she had to let her half-sister slaveholding husband erase her age with his semen. Okay. I confess, when I was young, I was too chicken to be a Black Panther. Being cats, I thought they would eat me. The good book. There is no book large enough to contain all truths, and no human discernible enough to recognize them. Any book that leads you to your God self is holy. Any book that points to the divine as something other than you is propaganda and was probably written by men still angry about having to settle for penises. Now there is no book so holy that it includes all the ways there are to interpret or access spirit. And the reason no such book exists is because God knows most of the world's people can't read. What all-powerful, all-loving deity would create such a body of knowledge and then hide it from his or her children and watch them suffer? June Jordan. I want to say something magnificent. Something equal to her stained glass worthiness, reflected in or out of the sun. Something delicate like a doily, flowering between sacred needles. I want something incredible to spill out of my mouth, down my clothes, onto the floor, out the door and into the world till everything, including white supremacy, comes to a screeching halt, while all those she fought for pause to be led by her fragrance to an impromptu party that I am giving tonight for all the human beings left on the earth. The pain of oppression in your breast, is that where you hid your sis? I made a fibroid out of mine. A system of breathtaking caves and hand-stitched tunnels. Your heart was a planet that too many wanted to colonize. 4. This burning capacity for righteousness swallowed up her whole life, and she swirled around in saintly humility, blasting machine gun indictments down to the last bullet, down to the last good cell. They want to be us. They want to be us. If they can't darken, then we must be skinned alive. If they can't sing, then we have to be made to scream. If they can't dance, then we must be shackled. And if their God is, if our God is omnipotent, then theirs must be diabolical. To my new neighbors, you think you're American the way the Jews thought they were Germans. You just wedded yourself to the nastiest karma in existence. Straight up. If white people just flat out admitted to being devils, guess how many Negroes would be gluing on horns and sewing on tails? Living in lack. As long as you accept crumbs, you never have cake, let alone a bakery. Okay. I'm really learning to love short things. Okay. Niggas. This is the last one. The last nigga one. How can you deny the existence of a thing that refuses to die? If you can't dissolve matter, what's the sense of renaming it? How can we bury the N-word when the N's are still wreaking havoc everywhere? What else can you call an entity that cannibalizes its own young? We need to stop dwelling on whether or not to say nigger and concentrate more on not being niggas. And don't act like you don't know what I mean. I like this. Let me do this. He-Man got issues. Rugged in a homeboy kind of way that only the experienced would challenge. Generously chiseled muscles, godly, sinewy, body angled so taut to receive ripples of pleasure. Chains of masculinity confine the air, choked with shipwrecked sounds of muffled discontent. Everybody at the party ain't happy. Thousands of demon seeds jettisoned into where no eggs or honor dare. The body that was so taut shivers and rises, zips up its pants and swaggers off with convoluted notions about manhood still dripping. The boy he acclimated himself to lies bleeding from the midnight welcoming, which will make him either scurry home to Jesus or rise, a beast comparable to the one currently slouching towards Bethlehem. Always shot, never the shooter. Hollywood shoots us up in a negative light. The NYPD shoots us down at night. The World Health Organization shoots us up with AIDS, and we shoot hoops. And then NAACP who likes to bury letters. If burying the N-word will take care of niggas, will burying the C-word take care of crackers? Critique on Women's Month. We gave them life, they gave us a month. July 4th, 2006. To celebrate the nation's independence, the district spent $3 million on fireworks, one for each homeless person in the nation. Ooh. This used to be my man. But then I saw him do Def Poetry Jam, Smokey Robinson. Yeah. So the poem is better to sing like a bird than bray like an ass. What can Africa be to me? Ain't no white woman for a brother to leave his black wife for in Africa. Who want to go to Africa when they can look almost white in America? Go back to Africa for what? A chance to reclaim the core of my black manhood? Nigga, please. I couldn't believe he said the things he said. Priorities. Michael Vick was responsible for the death of several dogs. And even after imprisonment, the sports world questioned whether or not he should be allowed to return to the game. Catholic priests molest children in double digits, yet they are neither defrocked or excommunicated from the church. So it must be a source of comfort for the Catholic victims to know that justice is blind unless it's a canine. The prostitutes lament. Now that they all dress like us, what are we supposed to do? Intifada. When evil turns out not to be amphibian, but instead wears Armani and looks like the boy next door, it must be hunted down like a rabid dog by a posse carrying torches or a circle of hearts carrying virtuosity. When evil is imperceptible among humans and beings of light are forced to use darkness to cloak their might, when evil seems to be without obstacle and moves with the ferocity of a forest fire, we must all dive deeper down into our God selves and raise the stakes a little bit higher. The fight against evil is never beyond reach. Angels are muscle in the arms of the righteous. As soon as evil steps into your awareness, attack. If it tries to overpower you, beat and kick on it. If it gets you in its embrace, break its skull with your forehead. If it gets a grip on you, bite it. If it shrugs off your teeth, spit on it. Don't wait till it shows up in a theater near you. As soon as rumors of evil threaten your ears, as a part of the living God, it is your moral obligation to study that evil like a scientist in a biological warfare center, and then tell everybody what you find at least twice. Tell it until you can run it in your sleep. Tell it until it starts to sound like a mantra. Tell it until they put a bounty on your tongue. When the place where your dreams gather forces one eye to remain open. When evil has ID'd you and has you and your convictions wearing dark sunglasses and peeping out of doorways. Resistance respects the right to flee. The truth will be better off crossing a border in your breast pocket than ground into a powder by the boots that seek to stomp you to death. There are so many bunkers on the battlefield, and no honor is lost in the pursuit of a better one. But when flight, like a possibility, has been shot down, and fortune cements your feet to the present, where evil claims every space, including the one you occupy, resist. Not because that's all that's left to do, but because it's the most that can be done. Resist with every God cell in you. Even if your body is bound, even if your mouth is gagged, even if your eyes are blindfolded, resist with the totality of your being. Shoot nuclear spears from the purity of your heart and bring evil down to its knees. Thank you.